Welcome to Addicted to Busy, the podcast specifically for overachieving property managers who are dying for a little more work-life balance in their lives. Each week, we dismantle all the BS that holds us back. You'll learn how to nix those tricky, self-sabotaging habits so that you have the time, energy, and motivation to create what you really want in life. If you're looking to shift from overcommitted to overjoyed, this is the podcast for you. Let's do this. Now, your host, 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐼.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Addicted to Busy. So as I'm recording this, I am staring out my window and watching the snowfall, and it looks like this is the first snowfall that is going to stick. And I have lots of feelings about that. I don't despise winter. I just don't love it. So I'm bracing myself for the cold tonight when I walk out of my office. Anyways, let's just hop right into it. Have you ever heard someone say something and immediately either the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and or you cock your eyebrow to one side? I had one of those moments while on a coaching call this week. For those of you who have never considered a demotion or who are actively working towards a promotion, I still want you to listen to this episode all the way through, because we're going to talk today a lot about conscious choice and why it's so important. And that applies whether you are seeking a promotion or a demotion. So to hop into it, one of my clients is currently really in the thick of it. And we have all been there at some point. It feels like work just keeps piling on and we end up staying late at work. And then we start guilting and shaming ourselves because we haven't spent enough time with family or made time for exercise. And it seems like our very existence is based solely around just keeping our head above water so that we can go back to work the next day and do it all again. I can recall a time where I was at a property that was undergoing some huge CapEx projects, and it felt like the very few hours that were left in the day were spent just getting ready to go back to work again. From 7 a.m. when the construction crews arrived until 8 p.m. when the tenants finally stopped hounding me, complaining about the construction, it felt like I had maybe an hour to make dinner, an hour to clean my house, maybe walk the dog, and then eventually I'd be back on my computer again working. It really felt like my whole existence revolved around this property. By the time that I had a chance to come up for air, I was so physically exhausted that I had very little interest in spending time with friends or family or taking part in any of my hobbies. Do any of you feel me here? Have you been here? So this last week, I was talking with my client and she was explaining everything that she needed to get done and how very little time she had for her family and her daughter, and how she didn't know where to say no, and how she felt obligated to continually help her team. And then she dropped this. She told me that while at a sales training, the instructor said that taking a title demotion is a sign of failure. And that's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I said, absolutely not. That is bullshit. Now, anyone in the coaching field will know that a coach is supposed to remain neutral and non-judgmental at all times and to let the client decide what is best for themselves. However, this was a moment where I had to call bullshit and say, no, that is crap advice. I really think that the opposite is true. I think it takes a very strong person to consciously take a title demotion for a bigger cause. And I'm very biased because I did this at one point. But I really think that there's more to it. If you haven't listened to episode 6, pause this now and go back and listen to that one first. It's titled, Listen to This Before You Give Your 2 Weeks Notice. And in it, I explain that being honest with your employer when you're struggling is far more difficult than quitting your job and moving on. When you're honest about your experience, you have to get yourself to a place of vulnerability. You have to admit where you might be falling short. You have to ask for help. And in my opinion, it's far more admirable to bring your humanness to work than it is to just quit and start over. And that applies with title demotions as well. There are 2 times, although I'm sure there are plenty more, where I think a title demotion is actually very admirable. Number 1, it's worth it to take a title demotion in order to try something new. Number 2, it's worth it to take a title demotion because your priorities have shifted. So number 1, I'm going to tell you the story of my own choice to take a title demotion. At one point, I was working for a property management company that was based in Chicago, but the company only had 1 property under contract in the Twin Cities, where I was. And there was literally no upward mobility for me unless I wanted to move to Chicago, which my husband didn't want to go, and I was fine with that. But that meant that I had to seek out a new job. It was around this time that I decided maybe I would get out of residential management and try my hand at commercial property management. Now, there was definitely a learning curve required in order to make this switch, but I had to think through the choice. If I truly wanted to do something new, I might have to be willing to make a sacrifice in order to do it. And in this case, it came with a title demotion and a fairly substantial pay cut. Now, this is a story for another day, but I really struggled with the title demotion. Even though it was a conscious choice and even though it was the right choice for me, there was definitely a hit to my ego. But at the end of the day, a little bruised ego was worth the experience that I got by throwing myself into uncharted territory. I am the type of person who does not do well with boredom. Once I work at a site for a few years and it's running smoothly, I start to get restless and uninterested. So for me, taking the title demotion and moving into commercial management was also a way for me to give my brain something to think about. It was a way for me to put myself in a place where I didn't know how everything was supposed to work and where I had to learn new things and figure things out. And to me, that's what makes work more interesting and enjoyable. At the end of the day, taking a title demotion is kind of a small price to pay if you're able to expand your knowledge into a new area. Moving on to number 2, it is worth it to take a title demotion because your priorities have shifted. I'm actually working with 2 different clients who are considering this for themselves. Whether you are a new mother, or maybe you have an aging parent, or maybe your own health isn't great, it's okay if you choose to take a title demotion because you feel called to place your focus elsewhere. You don't live to work, you work so that you can live. And at different points in your life, your focus will shift, as it very well should. Let's be honest about our industry for a moment. It is competitive. While most of us don't want to admit this, we judge our colleagues and make assumptions about their capabilities based upon the number of doors that they have or the square footage in their portfolio. Once we've achieved a certain number of doors or square footage under our belt, it's easy to make that a part of our identity. To some people, doing anything less than what they've previously accomplished means that something has gone wrong. A lot of people fear what others will think of them if they decide to take on less. They worry that others will think that they couldn't hack it or that they weren't capable. I love this quote that says, "Other people's opinion of you is none of your business." It's so true. There are some people who are simply judgmental people. No matter what you do, they'll find something to judge you for. So why try to please the masses? Why not just do what is best for you and your family? It's not worth it to let your assumed identity get in the way of you living out your values. I will be the first to admit that adjusting to a new identity or title is uncomfortable. However, there is something empowering about being able to do something for the simple fact that you want to, not because you have to. There is power in being able to listen to your inner voice that knows what you want and isn't afraid to go for it. For those of you who are considering a demotion in order to take care of someone else or to take care of yourself, yes, it will totally be uncomfortable to make the shift. Yes, people will definitely have opinions about your choice. And yes, people are probably going to ask you a couple questions. But you'll never regret making a choice that allows you to better the life of yourself or someone else in your life. If you don't know whether or not it's time to take a step down, you may need to do some soul searching from a long-term perspective. Keep in mind, a title demotion isn't permanent unless you choose it to be so. There's nothing wrong with saying to yourself, at this time in my life, I can't do it all, and so I'm choosing not to. Making that type of choice, in my opinion, is brave. It goes against the grain of this industry that tells us the only admirable way to move through the corporate ladder is upward. Listen, if this podcast is resonating with you and you're in this process, it doesn't matter whether you're changing titles to either try something new or because your values have changed. Either way, there is one thing that you're going to need to do in order to change your life, and that is you're going to have to be willing to feel discomfort. I think a lot of times when people hear me talk about thought work and how you can literally change how you feel by changing the way that you think, that they think that means somehow they can find a way to be exempt from pain. That if we just change our thoughts, we'll change our feelings and then we never have to feel pain again. But that's not always how thought work works. Listen, you could write your pro and con list. You could weigh all the options. You could do all of the thought downloads until the cows come home. And no matter what you choose, you will still have to be uncomfortable in some way or another. The question then becomes, can you be present with that discomfort and still show up proud of your choice? Can you allow yourself to make a difficult choice and have your own back when others have their opinion about it? I remember the last company that I was at would have each of its employees complete an annual review. And there were a bunch of multiple choice questions. And I remember being slightly caught off guard at one of the questions. It read, in the next year, it's my goal to ... And you had 3 options. You could select seek a promotion, stay in my current role, or seek a title demotion. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had an unconscious belief that the only place I'd ever want to go in my career was up. And although I probably wouldn't have cared to admit it, I was likely judgmental of those who didn't want to exceed past their current role. Now, I really admire people who know what they want and aren't afraid to openly choose to stay where they are and or choose to take a step down. When I think back on it, that review question at the time was really interesting to me. But in hindsight, I can really say that I worked for a company that valued people's varying goals and that wanted to retain people. My friends, be careful of getting caught up in the beliefs of the group. Don't forget to make your own decisions as to what it means to be brave. So often our brain is internalizing beliefs that aren't ours, especially when we first entered the workforce, when we first entered into property management. Our attitudes and beliefs about what we should and shouldn't do were modeled by our superiors. It's not uncommon that we want to mimic the people who are in the positions we wish to have. Throughout all of our careers, we're observing, we are reading between the lines, and we're trying our best to learn how to make it to the next level.
Some of our internal beliefs are also greatly affected by our immediate family or the society that we grew up in. I remember growing up in a smaller town, and I was raised with this idea that I needed to be married and have kids sometime within my 20s. Now, no one outwardly told me this. It was just assumed based on what I had seen modeled around me. This created an expectation of myself that wasn't necessarily based upon my own desires for myself. It was based upon a role that I thought I had to fill. Now, I'd like to think that those belief systems that were being modeled for us were done with good intentions. But it can be easy to make the mistake of assuming that one person's path is the right way to do something. Throughout my career, I'd frequently have supervisors who emailed late at night. I made an assumption that this was the way to success, being constantly available. Now, most of you who know me or who listen to this podcast know that this assumption backfired hard, and it took a serious toll on my health. I was showing up in my career without thinking for myself. I looked at what others were doing and I simply modeled it. Be cautious of this, especially as it pertains to the position you're in. You don't have to stay in it if it's no longer working for you. There is no shame in taking a step back. I want you to feel the empowerment of choosing to do what is best for you over choosing what is mainstay in our industry. For those of you who aren't considering a title demotion or are actively pursuing a promotion, I still want you to feel the empowerment of making that a very conscious choice. No matter what you do, you move up, move down, move to the side, make that choice with your own brain and with your own lifestyle in mind. If you have no clue how to do this, you know that I'm going to invite you to come join our group coaching program. Because if you want to see some empowering women making empowering choices, this group is where it's at. In fact, you can get a free one-to-one coaching session to try it before you buy it right at our website. So check it out at AnnaHavliana.com and click Get Free Coaching in the top right-hand corner of the screen. That's ANNAJAV as in vanish, ELLANA.com and click Get Free Coaching. I love you to pieces. Keep going.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Addicted to Busy. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.